Hi, I'm Ellie and welcome to Arcadia, my Toyota Hiace, which I recently completed self-converting into a camper van for traveling in. And if you've been following along, then you would know I've been posting weekly videos of my progress, but I thought it would be cool to create one video where I put everything together as a time lapse to see the whole thing completed. But if you do want to check out my completed van tour video or any of the DIYs in more detail, then check out the links in the description. I'm Ellie Wilder and you're watching Wilder in Motion. So here's Arcadia before. As you can see, a bit dinged up, a lot of the paintwork's come off and it's got this dirty ply floor which I took up and then cleaned all the dirt from underneath. After I stripped it, I took this plastic irrigation tube to cover all the electrics with to keep them protected, and then went in with a metal drill bit and some hand sandpaper just to remove the surface rust. I then took a liquid rust converter and painted over any of these exposed areas and scraped up some silicone which was being used to stick down the previous floor. So once that rust converter was dry, I primed and used a metal spray paint to paint over the areas to give the van a fresh canvas. For the floor insulation, I kept it pretty minimal, just with a bit of spray foam. Since the floor is so uneven, I couldn't do the traditional battens method, so I just cut it off like this when it dried, and this helped to level out the floor and provide a little bit of insulation. Then I took some of this thinner insulation, which is designed to go under floating floors, and cut it using a template to the size of the floor. And then this rolls out over the top of the metal just to provide a barrier between the metal and the subfloor, and then I stuck that around the edge with some tape. For the new floor, I also wanted it to be made of a nice sturdy plywood, and I cut that out to shape and then sealed everything with a coat of paint so that it wouldn't absorb too much moisture. Once it was in the van, I took some liquid nails and stuck everything down and put it so that it was one piece, and that is my subfloor complete. I then preemptively glued some pieces of modwood to the wall where I needed an anchoring point for my bench later on. For the wall insulation, I used some foam. I cut this to size and then stuck it to the wall using some liquid nails. I did originally use spray adhesive, but it wasn't strong enough. So I'm stuffing the gaps with some more of that spray insulation. So for the rear panel, I've just used the offcuts from the floor and any leftover foam that I had. And then here I'm trimming back the overflow from the spray foam so that I have a nice flat surface for the wall to go on top of. The walls are made from 3mm MDF, something nice and lightweight and quick to go up as well. So I cut out the shape and then used one side to trace the other onto. The van did have a couple of panels in it when I bought it, but they were in pretty poor condition, so I just used these as a template to trace around. I also cut out this little section to go on the top of the wall and then painted everything to seal it as well. I just used a cheap clearance paint for the back, and then for the front I used a slightly off-white to go in with my neutral base that I'm trying to create. And that's all glued to the metal frame using some more liquid nails. And I held that up with some pieces of wood while it dried. And the same thing on the other side as well. The door panel had some little plugs which I used to secure it. And then I added the upper piece as well. And I ran some silicone around the edge just to neaten things up a little bit. Now the rest of the areas of metal that were exposed still needed the rust converter covered, so I took some more of that white spray paint to just touch things up. I filled in the gap between the two wall panels and put some more paint over the top to hide that, and did the same thing on the door panel, just covering over any of the imperfections. And there's my blank canvas, ready for my vinyl flooring. I used these reclaimed planks and started from the center, gluing the middle piece down to the plywood subfloor and then building out from there. For the edges, I needed to cut out some special pieces so that everything would fit nice and snug. This was lots of measuring, and here I am putting in the back section and then the side. And I just used a bit of silicone to keep everything in place, but also allow for the expansion of the wood. Now onto ventilation. I used a template to mark out where I wanted my max air fan to go, drilled in the corners for my jigsaw, and then cut out the square for the max air fan to slot into. Then I did a little bit of sanding and painting to clean up the edges, and I used some butyl tape to level out the outside so that the flange would have something to sit on top of that was more level surface. Sealed everything with silicone and attached the flange securely to the roof, and added some extra silicone around the screws to make sure I wouldn't have any leaks. And then the main part of the fan just slots in on top, and some extra silicone on the inside as well and around the inside of the screws. For my bed frame, I made it out of these pieces of wood which I cut to length and then sealed them using some paint. This is going to be my bed and bench seat. I used some liquid nails and some staples to create the frame at the top. And for the legs of the frame, I used some recycled pine posts, which I also painted. I then attached the two together using my pre-drill countersink glue and screw method on each of the corners to create this secure frame with that cross beam in the middle as well. The one you're seeing here is my wider bench seat, but there's also going to be a narrow one on the other side. Underneath the bench seat, I installed a holder for the battery and then some L brackets on the bench seat frame so that it could be attached easily to the floor. And with a bit of glue and some more screws that are long enough to go right into the plywood subfloor, the larger bench seat is now attached. For the doors, to make some storage, I painted some melamine green and added some felt on the bottom to make sure it could slide smoothly along the floor, because this is going to support the center of my bed when it's in bed mode. I attached some hinges so that this could be then screwed into the posts of the legs. And then to keep things closed while I'm driving, I put on these rollerball clasps. So for bed mode, it's made up of two pieces of plywood which have a hinge to connect them. And I added some felt onto the bottom of this as well to stop it from sliding around too much. On the other side, it's a little bit different because it's storage at the back. So I first installed the post directly into the subfloor, and then I prepped some melamine for the storage cabinet by pre-drilling and gluing that in place. And then I attached the backrest, which is also made up of melamine, and this is going to have the storage cabinet on one side and the backrest on the other. And then the smaller bench seat is to the side of it as well. And then finally, just a fixed piece of melamine to act as the narrower bench seat / other side of the bed when it's folded into bed mode. wardrobe is made up of these IKEA metal frames. I cut one down to make it 6 drawers high, and I've got a narrow side and a wider side. I also cut down a reclaimed wardrobe so that it would be the right height for the van, and then glued and screwed it to the new size that would fit those drawers, and that's where it's positioned next to the larger bench seat. And then I glued and screwed that down into the plywood subfloor as well, and to make sure it was really secure, also into the bench seat next to it. And some L brackets on the other side. And then the drawer frames just slot into there, and at the back they've screwed in place using these little brackets. I also added a shallower cabinet above the main wardrobe. I cut this out of a recycled wardrobe as well, and this would give me a bit of extra storage space but allow for the curvature of the van. So that was also a matter of pre-drilling, countersinking, gluing and screwing. For the doors, I attached the same kind of hinges I'd used for the doors under the bed, and also some brass handles. And then it sits on top of the main wardrobe and is glued and screwed down into that. And the doors are attached using their hinges, as well as some more rollable catches to hold everything in place. And the same thing was repeated for the upper doors as well, and then I just slotted in my mesh baskets. Now you'll notice I've left a slot, and that is for my electronics nook. And here I am putting the fuse box in. So this is going to allow me to have control over my electrical system and a place to store my inverter. So I glued this shelf in place so that I could easily access that. And the space next to my wardrobe is delegated to my fridge. So I cut out a wall to frame the fridge with and secured this into the floor with some more L brackets. And to keep things nice and square, I also put a cross piece in and attached that into the wardrobe. Now to keep the fridge from sliding around, I also cut out some more pieces of wood to attach to the floor at the front and back, and this would keep everything nice and secure but still allow me to access the fridge. Above the fridge is a hanging area, so I added some supports for a cross beam that would allow me to have hangers on there. And as you can see, there's the fridge, wardrobe and hanging space next to the bench. For the bench cushions slash mattress, I used an IKEA foam mattress and cut this up into 3 sections so that it could sit on the bench seats. I made some custom covers and I measured these based on the cushions. They're double-sided with the floral print on one side and the palm fronds on the other. I also used the mattress protector to sew this into the cushion covers so that they would have a bit more protection as well. And it was just a matter of putting everything right sides together and sewing it together. I used a straight stitch and also a zigzag stitch to stop from fraying along all of the sides. So once I had the 4 main long sides together of each cushion, I then pinned in place the shorter panel so that a 3D object was formed, and then this was sewed in place as well. For the other end, to allow me to get it on and off, I added a zip. I pinned each side and sewed this with a straight stitch, followed by a zigzag stitch as well. And then I just slotted those over the foam cushions. So here is the floral side in bench mode and the cushions in bed mode with the palm fronds facing up. I also wanted to install a window on the sliding door, so I bought one from a Wreckers. So the first thing I had to do was remove the old silicone. Then I cleaned the area on the van and drew up from the template what I wanted to cut out. Put a bit of masking tape around the edge to stop things from scratching with the jigsaw. and then drilled some holes in the corners to allow me to fit the jigsaw in place. And then I followed my line to cut the whole shape out using a metal bit on my jigsaw. Then after cleaning the window again, I took some windshield silicone and put that on all the areas around the edge, and then I used some clamps to hold things in place. I left this to dry with the clamps on overnight. After a quick clean, the window looks like it was already there, and I just added some silicone at the back section so that it was properly sealed as well as on the inside. It's kind of crazy seeing the build as one big chunk like that. It just reminds me how far Arcadia has come. If you haven't seen my completed van tour video, then check that out up here, or I will link it in the description below. I will be continuing to post van life videos every single Saturday along my road trip, so if you want to come along for the ride, then be sure to like, subscribe. I'll see you next time.